So, what are we talking about today? Today, we're going to be talking about bridging the gap between IT and OT. And before we do that, I just wanted to quickly explain what was, well, what wasn't OT, if that makes sense. So, within IT, we've had traditionally this whole event management side of things going on, where we have got a whole load of application monitoring devices, database monitoring devices, network monitoring devices that create billions and billions of notifications for us, ping them off to the service desk, who then drowns in all the information. But luckily, these days, we've got uh, AI on hand to help us out with all of that, so we can start filtering out these notifications as they come in, and we can use our CMDB to look at impact and urgency and understand who is being affected by all these different bits and pieces, and then start escalating particular calls or farming them out to people who've got the skill sets to provide the remedies, or the location that they're in is appropriate for fixing a problem. But one way or another, we can start sorting out all of that information. And that's what we're really terming AI ops or ITOM, or something like that at the moment. However, that's not what we're talking about today, although that gap is one that's being bridged. The gap between IT and OT traditionally has been somewhat wider. So at this point, I'm going to bring in my guest and introduce you. David Robinson from Capula. So everybody gets a round of applause on this show. We can fake it, Dave.
Yeah, we can. It's probably the first time I've ever had a round of applause is entering into an event or a room.
Well, we might do a standing ovation at the end. You never know. So in order to be open and honest about all these sort of things, Dave and I have known each other for many years. We started off working together way back in the 1980s, believe it or not, despite our youthful good looks. And we were working at Mitsubishi Electric. And I guess we were dealing with OT devices, although that's not what they were called at the time. I think it was really industrial automation was what we were talking about at the time. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to flick onto another slide and let Dave introduce himself and Capula, what Capula do, and to talk about what sort of OT devices have started to appear since the 1980s. So over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks. Yeah, our careers started off roughly about the same time back in the 80s. And as you rightly said, we were looking at industrial control products. And there was very little, any mention of any sort of IT equipment. It was all dedicated, moving away from relays into electronic devices, but very distant from where we are now. So as things have progressed across all different industries, all different sectors, is the use of electronic devices, programmable equipment that is used to facilitate the operations of a company or an organization or a building or something like that. So, operational technology covers a smorgasbord of different devices, different products, different equipment, all types of things. If we take a look at, I work for Capula. So Capula are a systems integrator born out of the traditional industrial control and automation world. Been serving energy industry for over 50 years, working on, big nuclear generation plants, national grid, other big energy firms, as well as, oil and gas process, other areas. And we've seen the journey, along the way, the company as itself, moving away from, more traditional bespoke type operational technology devices to more generic devices that as they are today, and where they adopt a lot of IT technologies or include them in them. But the grouping of the actual what are OT devices. Just give you some examples. So in the traditional industrial world, it's robots, it's programmable controllers, it's industrial computers, CNC controllers, it's pumps, motors, all those types of things, right? That people are familiar at, and those are the things that keep a process running, keep a manufacturing plant running. But other OT devices exist in the other sectors. I did some work some time ago in railways. So what are OT in railways? Well, they're the switches for the circuits that point the train in the right direction. They're the signals. They're the communications on the platform. It's the lighting. It's everything that keeps that. It's the ticketing machines. It's everything that actually keeps that business running, because they need that to run the railways and serve the customers. And even in buildings, even more so now with net zero and driving energy consumption down, tracking carbon. If we look into buildings, well, we've got heating, ventilation, we've got air quality that's being monitored. We've got fans are there. We've got lighting. We've even got systems in there to do your meetings and things like that. We've got sensors all over the place measuring air quality, humidity. We've got lifts. We've got escalators. All these things are absolute requirements that are part of operating a building or an entity. Again, going back to the railways and London Underground job I did, was a critical part of their infrastructure is escalators, because if the escalators are not working, it's a safety hazard. They will have to shut the station down if there's not appropriate exits and things like that in certain stations to be able to do that. So these are all related to technology devices that are used in the operation of a particular business, whatever industry and whatever sector they are.
Yeah, so I think it pretty much, it covers pretty much, everything, doesn't it? I mean, if we look around us at the moment, and we're looking at all of our smart devices and to turn off, I mean, a top one at the moment has got to be saving gas, hasn't it? Really, the price of gas at the moment. So, if you can monitor and save stuff from that perspective, then that's fantastic. But also, I'm guessing it really, when we're looking at OT devices, we're looking at status of things as well, whether they're up or down, and what do we do to fix them, and is that when IT is starting to get involved and you're firing tickets from OT to IT? How does that work?
Yeah, it is. Probably, I say 15 years ago, something like that, we began to see what they call the IT/OT, the merging of the two. And what that actually meant was it was cheaper to build OT devices with with computer chips, with all the stuff that was going into people's computer. It was cheaper to use those standard IT devices and components, as well as software, begin to adopt their operating systems, begin to adopt some of the applications, to use those for the purpose in an OT environment. So that brought in a different type of technologies, but it also brought in all of these management tools and the things that go along with that. And you want to manage, monitor the server or monitor the memory or whatever it may be. But the biggest difference is not that the hardware is any much different, or how it's actually configured is necessarily massively different, but it's how it's used and what do you do if you get get an error, because they could be completely different opposite reaction to, you don't reboot, on an OT floor, right? Because the whole production stops. Yeah. Whereas you'd be happy to reboot a server and, and disrupt a few people in the office. That's just kind of one example. So the devices are the same, but the approach and how you manage it can be very different. And I think that that's what people, are most fearful of.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You can't sort of reboot a building or an escalator or a lift or whatever when there's people inside it or something like that, just because it stopped working. Um, so, yeah, I think there's probably quite a lot of different case point scenarios going on there. But traditionally, these systems were all totally separate. Where do you see things being handed over now to IT? Because if I go back to that ITOM situation, the one thing we're not short of in the ITOM world in terms of database applications and all that sort of network monitoring is notifications. I mean, we get billions of notifications. I suspect that in the OT world, that's magnified by a factor of 10 or something in terms of the notifications that are incoming. How do you filter those down to something that is sensible before passing effectively a ticket over to IT and saying, right, go and do something?
Yeah, well, there's two different aspects of that, because if there's in the OT world where you're using systems to monitor operations, control, whatever it may be, there's a terminology called alarm flood, right? And that's been going for years. And actually, it's related. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head which particular major incident happened, but it was directly related to an alarm flood. They had too many alarms going off, and they couldn't sort out the critical alarms from the maintenance type alarms. And that's been going on in OT for a long time. And I think IT is only actually is following on from that, because there are industrial standards that exist in the OT right about how to categorize, how to do those things. And you're right, the numbers are ridiculous in terms of the number of alarms. And if very similar to in the IT world, if you don't configure them in the right way at the start, if you don't categorize them, if you don't route them to the right place, then you might as well not have them, because they're actually causing more harm than they are causing good in some aspects. So it's no different in when you're approaching it, is to what is going through that evaluation stage to say, well, what is critical, what and what's the impact, what's the risk, do the risk analysis, do the impact assessment, and then look at, well, what is the causes of that, and then begin to assess from there, and start with your critical alarms, and then work down. We find in actually a lot of stuff, hear the technologies around industrial IoT and industry 4.0 and stuff like that, and people are putting systems in, and they do the absolute opposite. They turn all the notifications on, so you get everything. It's like, just to say, well, we'll figure out afterwards what we want. Well, experience says that you actually never get the time to go and figure out and do it properly, and then you live with it at the detriment to the overall system. So
It's funny you should mention that. When I'm harking back to me dealing with processes in IT. And when you first are dealing with instant processes or major incidents or anything like that, when you're in there as a consultant designing the process, everybody, and you can guarantee this, everybody wants to be notified about everything.
Yeah.
That is until you go live and they start getting all the notifications, at which point nobody wants to be notified about anything, because they ain't going to have any time to do anything once they start getting notifications. So
again, I put in a system in. It was again London Underground. We put in a condition monitoring system, and the kind of subject matter expert for the assets that we're looking at wanted to be notified when these alarms hurt, but he didn't realize that we've put in a system that one is 24/7, 365, and it was resilient, i.e. it was never going to turn off. So, and he wanted text alerts and email alerts. And then within about a few days of, it being on, he was like phoning up, get this off, it's waking me up at night, those types of things. But what you described there is exactly what I've experienced as well.
Yeah, my phone's melted. Why did you ever think I'd want all of these? So
it used all the battery on my phone because I had it on vibrate. All those things.
So too much data can sometimes. Well, it's always a challenge. But at least we have the data to work with in the first place, I suppose. So I've got a few questions lined up for you. So what are the business benefits from bridging the gap between IT and OT? Why should people be looking at this? as something to do? What examples have you seen as, well, I suppose two questions, just subtly different. What major business benefits have you seen for companies? And then subtly different, major benefits for the end users of systems as well. So obviously business benefits can appear that are invisible, that people don't see. But what are the visible and invisible benefits, if you want to categorize it in that way?
Yeah. So I think the important thing, you touched on it as before we went on to the subject, about the data, right? So the more that you know, or the more that you can extract from the systems on your operation, wherever it comes from, will put you in uh, at an advantage, as opposed to not knowing about something. But that doesn't solve everything, right? Just having the data and then, just sitting in, piling up wherever it may be piling up. So first and foremost, what we see the value, it's really simple, actually. It's got nothing to do with all the, what everyone has believed, that everything's going to be autonomous and we have AI. The first and foremost benefit is visibility, right? The people at the, even, at the CEO, COO level currently have a dated view of what's going on in their operation, because it's captured on a spreadsheet and then moved by someone, and then done in a weekly or monthly, update. So we see that there's a move to say improve the visibility. There's a phrase that's used, and I use it often, is this one pane of glass. Can you go and look at the screen and see what the KPIs of your whole organization are? And it's not just financial. It's like, if you're a manufacturer, how many widgets did we make today? Today, I want to know today, because otherwise, if you find out that you didn't make enough, if you wait for the system, or the normal traditional, chain mail sort of, you'll find out that you didn't need enough 3 weeks late, and there's nothing you can do about it. So they're always playing catch up. So first and foremost, visibility is the most, for end users, is the biggest benefit, as I say.
I find it interesting that we continuously come round to parallels in different OT and IT, and the way I can see those sort of visibility. And I quite often talk to people that a specification will come out for a service desk and they will want 30 different reports on what went on last month. And I say to them, why do you care about what went on last month? What you want to know about is what's going on now and potentially what might happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's what we're interested in, not stuff that's gone past that you can't rectify because it's already happened. But
Yeah.
let's look at what's happening real time right now in a dashboard, single pane of glass, if that's what you want to call it. But also then next step is proactively looking at, I guess through AI as well, predictions on what might happen going down the line. And I suspect that OT is actually more mature in those predictions than IT, actually, because if I remember correctly, mean time between failure of components has been dead central to what has been going on in OT for many, many years, and it hasn't really in IT. It's slightly different.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, because you're buying in the, specifically in the industry, the larger industries, whether it be, generation plants, rail, they're looking at a lifetime of a product that's going to be 10, 15, 20 years. So that's why mean time before failure was critical, because they don't go and change and swap them out. It's too costly, too disruptive to their business. IT haven't had that problem. It's like, well, just upgrade, just get a new one. You can't, it's not feasible. It does, the business doesn't make sense. Even in the, where I know of, instances, even with IT, industries which are heavily reliant on IT, like banking, deep in the deep chasms of those organizations sits small computers that are running the oldest operating systems you can believe, because the cost of change of those and the disruption that it causes, you just can't justify doing it. So yes, I mean, definitely, understanding the importance of having reliable equipment. I mean, you talk about, having resilience in the cloud nowadays. Well, there's been hot standbys and dual networking going on in control world for decades. So definitely that's an area where OT arena is more mature, I would say.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to have to agree with that, and accept that I'm in the wrong side of the fence from that perspective. I've got one up here which is just technical challenges in general. So when people are looking at communicating from one part of OT to IT, of course, there's all of these communication protocols and stuff like that, which are, again, have been standards in OT for a long, long time. Are there technical challenges with just getting stuff to talk to one another and then bringing that together and handing it over to IT in a form that they're going to understand it?
There are definitely the challenges, and I think that a number of those are being addressed now. I think they've been widely recognised, and it goes along the lines of a bit like I was saying. You've got equipment that's through generations. I'm working on a project right now. We've got 40, 50-year-old machinery, and it is that old, with with a manual process that is making a critical product, and they need to be able to manage the quality of that product and be able to capture the information supporting it. So how do you get that? Well, in that instance, maybe you can throw some new equipment at it and surround it with new tech on top of the old tech and start to gather some data and then turn it into information. But where you've got this more recent sort of stuff, they speak, like you mentioned, they speak different languages. It's like you've got to be able to be fluent in multiple languages if you want to be able to extract data from various parts of the OT within the OT landscape. So that sort of lends itself to, if there's a Babel fish type of thing in the middle that you could use that would consume and speak all these different languages and then speak in a standard language when it's communicating outwards from the OT landscape, then that kind of can solve it, and that's really happening. So you are seeing now sort of things like MQTT as an industry standard protocol that's being used widely everywhere, that is being used in to link across the two landscapes, as it were, bring the two worlds together. They work very well together. There's an understanding of format that's required, to communicate. That there's the speed, the security, all of these different things that are covered. So there's the technical challenges of being able to understand and speak fluently these languages, but now there's a number of different solutions that are making it a lot easier. And I often say, if the businesses want to move ahead, and optimize their plan, or get greater visibility, they've got to start not asking about, is it a technical issue? Pretty much it isn't anymore. The technology's out there to solve it. More it's about people and process. So digital transformation, wherever it may be, is a combination of technology, people, process. There are always certain pieces where you've got a real technical difficulty, but there are so many companies emerging, and focusing on that can help with that. But getting the people and process right is key to being successful.
Okay, I think we have another parallel there, don't we? Really, in terms of people, process, technology. Yeah. So I knew time would fly by, but I don't think we have a dead stop on this. So what I wanted to ask you was, if somebody wanted to start looking at bridging that gap between IT and OT, which are the quick wins or the simple benefits, the straightforward devices you might want to start looking at, rather than maybe some of the more complex ones, if indeed that is simpler. But what would be your first steps? Because I think that, just looking around, everybody who's got a building and who's in a building they've all got OT devices all over the place. You don't have to be a nuclear power plant to take advantage of this bridging the gap. So what would be your advice for people who were taking their first steps?
I think that the approach that, if we engage with clients, we do it on a wider scale. Is you kind of go through this kind of discovery, right? So you go through this assessment, and these are all processes that actually have come from the IT world, right? That have been using this, way of going about it, and we're adopting those very similar processes in our world. So it's about, what have you got? That's the first question. Is what have you got that's monitoring your building? Do you have a BMS? Yes or no? Do you have a fire alarm system? Yes or no? And then the next question is, once you've identified whatever it is, well, who makes it? Yeah, who supports it? What version is it? These are all the questions you go through, like in a discovery sort of thing exercise, which is no different in IT and OT. And then that gives you the base level of information that can actually guide you on what the art of the possible is, what the gaps are in terms of maybe where you want to be, and what your underlying systems will allow you to be. It will allow you to determine whether it's going to be a big job to get to the first step, or is it going to be an easy job to get to the first step. So it's kind of that, because in most cases, it's all doable. You can break it down. It's not a big job. We use a lot of the words around proof of concept, proof of values, those type of things in both sectors. And in OT it is no different.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, we're back to the parallels again. Discovery is definitely the first step. Find out what you've got. Look at, as you've mentioned, manufacturers. What language are they speaking, and what have you got plugged into it, and everything, and then take it from there. So,
Yeah.
just look around you is almost the first
Yeah,
step.
exactly. Look around you. Don't make a judgment on it either. Because I
Mm,
find often that people will see something and they say, I don't speak that language, so therefore that's a problem. And
mm,
it's like, well, no, that's not necessarily a problem, because
mm,
you don't speak that language. But, in the physical world, there's a translator that can do it for you. You
mm,
just don't know about it, and you need to spend some time, maybe, either getting someone to look for it for you, or you spending your time yourself looking for it. So don't view the fact that it's old, whatever it is, or speaks a different language, is a different color, as a problem. Just look at it from just informational only at that point. And then once
mm.
you've got it all together, then you can begin to make the assessments. Then you can begin to look at it and make a judgment on what's going to be easy and what's going to be difficult to do.
And at that point, when you're asking Capula to come in and bring in their Babel fish, effectively. So
Yeah. Well, as a system integrator, it's one of the things I actually really enjoy. And I have had times with manufacturers, and with the manufacturing side, you kind of you've got your focus, you've got your good products, but when it gets into the periphery, you kind of are not encouraged to go on further and beyond. You kind of you kind of stay within your comfort zone, because that's your job and that's where you want to you operate. But with a system integrator, it's like our job is to I always say the clue is in the name, right? We have to integrate these multiple systems. So if we can't speak multiple different languages, if we don't understand that systems operate differently and need to interact differently, then we're not doing our job. And that's one of the greatest values that we can bring, is not being scared of those types of things, and also, of course, having experience of where we've done it before in similar types of scenarios, or where we can show experience that is transferable from one experience to another.
mm, mm. I mean, that all makes perfect sense to me, and I love all of the harping back to processes and things like that as well, because um, it, I remember I did manufacturing engineering at college, and we learned about just-in-time technology, and Kanban and all these
Kanban,
good Japanese stuff. And then later on, I find out that this is actually the basis for DevOps, as we call it today.
yep.
And pretty much I thought, oh, that stuff that I did years and years ago, that's all going to be no use to me whatsoever. And then I start reading the Phoenix Project, which is a famous DevOps book, and think this all sounds very familiar to me. And that really aligns with your point about it doesn't matter how old it is, and that applies to process as well. We can pick up process and learn from older process, and apply that across new technology as well, I think. So we're coming towards the end because we're already sort of 5 minutes
Overrun.
over where we thought we were going to do, but we predicted we were going to talk for far too long and bore people silly. I don't know. But for me, one of my closing questions is this, really a sleeping giant? Because OT has been out there for years and years, but connecting it to IT hasn't been so much. But there is OT stuff everywhere. And as we've already mentioned, from the 1980s when it was robots and PLCs pretty much and switches, now we've just got stuff you can touch everywhere around you. Is this bridge going to almost disappear so they IT and OT become one as a sort of a whole sleeping giant woken up and addressing everything?
Yeah, I think so. In my opinion, so the a lot of the introduction of Internet of Things and those types of things that have been going around for a few years and been hyped up and what have you, have been focused around highlighting the sexy technology and coming up with a use case of your fridge is going to tell you that you need a new milk, and your cheese has gone moldy, and it's going to send a message to Tesco's and they're going to deliver it to your house, and you go, yeah, that's great, oh, that's really cool, but no, I'm still going to go and your personal behavior is not going to change for that, right? So whilst that highlights the potential cleverness of the stuff, you can't. I struggle to see that it's going to make massive changes. They're going to put it as features for selling products and all those that is there. But if we look in the OT sector and we moved into, well, we're already in it, smart grids, smart cities, smart buildings. There's tangible use cases that really make a difference there, right? Whether it's around conservation and net zero, driving net zero, which it is right now, or whether it's something else in the future. So all of these devices, we were involved in a project, smart cities project a while back, but and when you start looking at that and you're looking at an integrated city, so what does that look like? Smart lighting. Well, the lighting on there is LED. It's going to be no different to the lighting in your building, right? It's a light. You turn it on, you turn it off. Oh, and the clever ones, you can adjust it to different brightness levels. Right, great, right? So you got them, but you've also got integrated cities. So you got autonomous vehicles going around. You got traffic lights. You've got power. Where's the power coming from? Oh, it's solar. So you've got solar and wind. And then you've got your operations of your, heating and ventilating. You got your shops, all of these things with the, people movers and things like that. Everything and residential areas and things. So all of that is going to be interconnected, and you're going to see this, what was a control room that was operating in a factory that was isolated, and Homer Simpson sitting there on the on the red button trying to press it, there. But we're going to have cities like that. And there's going to be, it won't be the numbers of millions of devices that talk about, how many toasters are out there or how many microwaves, but it will be hundreds of thousands of devices, but part of the national critical infrastructure that it is, but actually part of our own critical infrastructure in how we live in a particular city. Probably I'm not going to be here when it all happens, but I do believe that it's going to be massive, and it's going to be exponential in growth.
Well, I'm interested to see comments come in there from Paul Harron saying, "What has IoT done for us?" Well, Paul, we're not going to answer that question today because we're already out of time, and that's another discussion entirely, I think.
Yeah, but glad you're on, Paul, because I know who Paul is. So there you go.
I know Paul, do you? Right? Yeah. That does tend to happen. So Paul, thanks for interacting with the stream. We're almost finished today. I'm just going to go on to my next scene here, which says David Robinson from Capula. Thank you for joining us. Dave, where can people find you?
www.capula.com for the company. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's on the invite. So yeah, happy to help out.
Well, everybody get in touch with Dave. If you want to wake a sleeping giant, I can confirm Dave's about 6'6". He's a sleeping giant, and go wake him up, poke him with a stick on LinkedIn or via Capula. And thanks for joining us today. Hang on around in the green room. I'll have a chat with you afterwards, Dave. But for the moment, I'm going to say cheerio to Dave.
Excellent. Thanks, Martin. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So that was our first guest on the IT show. We've got some more coming up, so I suggest you just watch this space on LinkedIn. We've got Chris Pope and Claire Agata joining us at dates to be confirmed. And I've also been speaking to Ian Cameron today from Aberdeen University. We'll be covering all sorts of different things in coming shows. So just keep an eye on things. But for now, it's cheerio, good night, and goodbye from me. And I'm just going to play you a quick outro. Thanks for joining.